Hello everyone, my name is James Ryan and I'm here to teach you how to build a computer in Minecraft. We're going step by step from the ground up. So let's see what happens here. So we're in the middle of testing a truth table. So now we are testing what happens if A is off but B is on. The output should still be on as shown. But what if A and B are both on? Then the output will turn off. And this is demonstrated here, because you can see what's going on is, it is in fact an inverted an OR gate with both the inputs inverted. But if you take a closer look, you'll see that this even matches up with the actual redstone. Okay, so this is an input A being inverted here, input B, no, this is input A being inverted here, input B being inverted here, and then both of these inputs are then going into this OR gate because they're both connected to the same redstone wire, and that acts as an OR gate. So that's cool. That makes sense. But if you take another look, you'll see that here's what's also happening. In order for this to be turned off, then both of these redstone torches have to be depowered. But the only way for both of them to be depowered is for both of these to turn off. So everything works. This is actually a type of mathematics. Like with most things in mathematics, no matter how out of whack you get, if you do it right, then everything will always match up. The simplest things match up with the hard things, and everything always works out in the end. And that's one of the things I love about maths. Get the bam, bam, replaced. So yeah, that's what's going on. Now what we can do is we can invert this gate. And if we do so, then these three will become off, and these three will become on. And what we've done here is, if you take a look, if A is off and B is off, then it's off. If A is on and B is off, then it's off. If B is off and A is on, if A is off and B is on, it's off. But if A and B are both on, then and only then it is on. It is on. This is called an AND gate because the output is on if A and B are on. They both have to be on. So if we can create our AND gate right now by inverting it, by inverting the output of that previous gate we made, and voila, an AND gate. This is the basic AND gate. Turn one on, it's not on. Turn this one on, the output doesn't go on. Both of them off, doesn't go on. But turn both on, and voila, output. So both A and B have to be on for it to output a signal. This is pretty useful. Now there is also a name, as you can probably guess, for that previous gate. If we reinvert this, this is called a NAND gate because it's an inverted AND gate. It's the opposite of an AND gate. Now, while we could make our inverted AND gate like so, this as a NAND gate. Oh, hang on. While we could make our inverted AND gate like so, that would be redundant because, as you can see, even though this is called an AND gate and not a NAND gate, it really is actually just an inverted NAND gate. The NAND gate is actually the more basic gate. So, as you can see, this is an AND gate right here. So, that's cool. Now, remember before when I told you that... So, as you can see, we've been making all of these other cool gates out of just ORs and NORs. Because basically what you do is you take the OR gate, and to make all the other gates, you just use the NOT gate to invert either the output, the output, one of the inputs, the other input, or both inputs, and you can combine these to make different gates. So if I wanted to make a weird gate, like by inverting input A and input B and inverting the output, I made the AND gate. But I could make all sorts of other gates, such as something called the implies gate, which looks a little like this. This would be called an A this would be called an A. If I put this here, and this is called an A implies B gate. The only time it's off is when A is on but B is not. Whereas if I swap these around, this would be called a B implies A gate. And as you can see, to get from here to the OR gate, you just need to invert one of the inputs. Here's an OR gate. Hang on. No. Here's an OR gate. Now, how do I get to the A implies B gate? Well, it's quite simple. By inverting input B, bam, bam, I get to the old B implies A gate. That is, this is a B implies A, right? No, this is an A implies B gate. So there we go. A implies B gate. So with simple OR and NOT, you can create all the other gates. There's a bit of lying in that. I told you that to make all other gates, you only needed an OR and NOT. But I kinda lied. There is one gate that is actually can be used to create. There's one gate that on its own can be used to create all other gates. Now in Minecraft, this gate is not actually the simplest. But if we were to treat everything with NOR gates, but this gate is the NOR gate, as I just blurted out, and it can also be used. And the reason you can use a NOR gate instead of an NOR and NOT gate is because the NOR gate is really just a combination of the NOR and of the OR and NOT gates, and you can selectively use it. You can buy this. See this NOR gate? This is a NOR gate, right? Agreed. You can make a NOR gate act like a NOT gate by simply making A and B, the A and B inputs, the same signal. Ta-da! Now it's a NOT gate, and then you can use two NOR gates to create an OR gate by using one NOR gate as a usual NOR gate, and using the second one as a NOT gate by putting the output of the first NOR gate into the second NOR gate as both inputs, and so that way NOR gates can act as OR and NOT gates. And there you go. That's how you do basic logic gates. Now that we know about logic gates, it's time to talk about latches. You might be thinking, well, you just showed me everything I can do with logic gates. Not quite. Obviously, just like with genetics, it was eventually discovered that there's a lot more than Mendelian genetics. There was non-Mendelian genetics, where you had multiple alleles and multiple genes and sex-linked inheritance and all that. Just like that, there's a lot more to Redstone than meets the eye. For starters, you can have logic gates with more than two inputs on more than two possible. Actually, I don't think that's possible, but you can definitely have logic gates with multiple inputs. But another thing is when Redstone and even in electronics stuff interacts at a more basic level, or if you plug gates into each other, you get interesting things start to happen that don't act like normal logic gates. You would expect to act don't act how you would expect normal logic gates to act. So the first of these is called the RS NOR latch. The RS NOR latch is a type of SR latch. A lot of R's and S's. There's reason for this. SR latch stands for set reset latch, and a latch is a technical term meaning any circuit that retains its state. There's also something called a flip-flop, which also has memory of some kind. However, these are different in some way that I don't quite know yet, so I'll have to tell you about that later. But this is a type. There are two. The reason I'm saying RS NOR latch and RS latch and SR latch is because convention states that, by convention, when you're referring to SR latches in general, you say SR, which means set reset latch. But when talking about a specific type of latch, you say RS, so reset set. So when I say RS NOR latch, what I mean is it's an SR latch based on the NOR gate, and I'll show you why it's based on the NOR gate after I explain it to you in one of its simpler forms. So the basic, hang on, that's not it.